All right, so get this. Blockchain. But
Yeah.
not just like your typical Bitcoin stuff.
Oh, going beyond crypto, huh?
Way beyond. We're talking government. Like how they spend our tax money, keep records, the whole shebang.
Sounds ambitious.
Oh, it is. We've got sources saying Elon Musk wants a blockchain U.S. Treasury.
That's a headline grabber for sure.
Right. Plus, there's research saying blockchain could slash auditing costs, like, massively. And we've got insights from big names in Web3, folks like the Coinbase CEO, Brian Armstrong, and Binance's CZ, Changpeng Zhao.
So we're tackling the big picture stuff and getting into the nitty-gritty.
Exactly. So first up, auditing. Usually it's slow, pricey, and honestly kind of dull.
Not exactly known for its thrills.
Nope. But this research, it's by Sean Cow. He's the director of the Smith AI Initiative, and it's published in Management Science. Get this. They found using blockchain for auditing could cut costs by 70%.
70%? That's a lot.
Right. Like, what could that mean for businesses? Maybe even for us when we do our taxes. Think about it.
I am thinking about it. How do they even get those savings, though?
Well, the study says blockchain automatically verifies and records every transaction on that, immutable ledger.
Ah, yes, the famous immutable ledger. Always hear about that.
Buzzword central, I know. So break it down for us. What does it actually mean for auditing? Why is it such a big deal?
Okay, so imagine this. A digital record of every transaction, and it can't be changed or deleted ever.
That sounds pretty useful.
It's huge. Every transaction is like cryptographically locked in and linked to the one before it, creating a chain, messing with the data. Basically impossible.
So for auditors, no more digging through mountains of paper, right?
Exactly. Way less manual checking, less relying on other people to verify things.
They can finally focus on the big picture stuff, more analyzing, assessing risks.
Right. The whole process is streamlined, so way less chance of errors or, someone cooking the books.
And wouldn't this system also mean better data privacy? Like, financial info is super sensitive.
Oh, for sure. With blockchain, auditors and clients can share that sensitive stuff without, compromising anything. Only those with the right cryptographic keys can access it.
So we're talking more accurate financials, more trust, and way more security, all thanks to blockchain.
It's a pretty compelling case, I'd say. Changes how we think about financial reporting and who's accountable for what.
Now, speaking of shaking things up, let's talk about Mr. Disruptor himself, Elon Musk.
Ah, yes, gotta love him. What's he up to now?
He wants to bring blockchain to the U.S. Treasury. Even created this thing called the Department of Government Efficiency.
Kitschy.
Yeah, get this, the acronym is D.O.G.E.
Like the meme coin, seriously.
Yep, totally him, right? But jokes aside, he claims this department has saved taxpayers $36.7 billion already.
Whoa, that's a lot of money.
And he says his end goal is to cut government spending by $2 trillion.
Those are some bold claims. How's he planning on doing all that with blockchain?
Real-time tracking of every financial transaction, that's the key, according to our sources.
So every dollar the government spends, tracked and publicly auditable on the blockchain.
Pretty much. Makes it way harder for, shady payments to slip through.
That's a huge increase in accountability and could even discourage wasteful spending in the first place.
Right. Imagine that kind of transparency in government. But something this big is going to cause some pushback,
Well,
right?
of course. Some are worried about inflation if this happens too fast.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And can blockchain even handle all the transactions the U.S. Treasury makes every day? That's a ton of data.
Good point. And then there's the whole question of, the U.S. dollar. Some worry about what this could do to its global power.
It's a lot to consider. A lot of potential benefits, but also a lot of unknowns and risks.
Before we dive into those, though, let's see what other experts in the Web3 world think.
Sounds good. Broaden our horizons a bit.
Crowdfund Insider interviewed a bunch of blockchain execs about this whole government thing.
I bet they've got some interesting takes.
They do. We've got Gene Rouseys from SmartX, Harrison Seletsky from Space ID, Sebastian Pfeiffer over at Impossible Cloud Network, and Phil Mataris, he's the CEO of AR.io.
That's a pretty solid lineup, all deeply involved in building the future of the internet, so their thoughts on this are super valuable.
And they're excited about how blockchain could be used for way more than just the Treasury.
Like what?
Like storing government records. They say blockchain can make sure that data is immutable.
There's that word again, data immutability. Remind me what that means and why it matters here.
Basically, it means once data is on the blockchain, it can't be changed or deleted. Ever. Makes it super secure and transparent.
Ah, Got it. So when we're talking about government records, that's a game changer.
Big time. Think uh, birth certificates, land titles, voting records, all that important stuff, permanently secured and verifiable on the blockchain.
Less fraud, faster bureaucracy, more trust in government. I can see the appeal.
But I'm guessing these experts also talked about some downsides.
You bet. They brought up data censorship, which is a big worry, and the need for, really solid storage solutions that can't be tampered with.
Makes sense. If we're putting sensitive government info on a blockchain, it better be airtight.
Absolutely. It's a tough balance. Got to have security, but it can't be so secure that nobody can access it, right?
Totally. It's a really cool challenge, figuring out how to make it all work.
I'm curious to see how developers tackle it as this whole blockchain thing keeps evolving.
So we've got researchers saying blockchain can save a ton of money, Elon Musk with his big vision for the Treasury, and now these Web3 experts talking about how it can transform government data and records. Everyone seems to be buzzing about blockchain.
It's definitely got people talking.
But there's one more voice we got to hear from. Changpeng Zhao, better known as CZ. He co-founded Binance, one of the biggest crypto exchanges out there.
Okay, I know CZ. What's he saying?
He made this bold statement in Cointelegraph, said, quote, all governments should track all their spending on the blockchain.
Whoa, that's a statement. What's his reasoning?
He's all about public accountability. Says if governments are using taxpayer money, the public has a right to know where it's going and how it's being spent.
Makes sense, especially with all the concerns about government debt and transparency these days.
Right. CZ is basically saying put all government spending under a microscope, let everyone see it.
That's a pretty radical idea.
It is. But the fact we're even talking about this shows how powerful and disruptive blockchain tech is.
No doubt about that. It's
Yeah.
definitely making people think differently.
Feels like we're at a tipping point, like blockchain could really change how we interact with governments.
It's exciting, and it brings up even more fascinating questions, which I guess we'll tackle after, we'll just keep going.
Right into it. So we've been talking about some pretty radical ideas, huh? Blockchain audits, a transparent U.S. Treasury. It's like we're on the edge of some huge change in how governments work.
Yeah, there's a lot of energy in this space right now, a lot of potential. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We've mentioned some concerns, and we should probably dig into those a bit more.
Good point.
Hmm.
It's easy to get caught up in all the excitement, but actually making these ideas work, especially in these massive government systems, well, there are bound to be some bumps in the road.
For sure. One of the biggest ones is, can blockchain even handle it? I mean, governments process tons of transactions every day. Could blockchain keep up without slowing everything down?
That's a good question. I remember reading about how Bitcoin struggled with that as it got more popular. Wouldn't governments run into the same issue if they used blockchain for all their transactions?
It's a valid concern. But, blockchain tech has come a long way since the early Bitcoin days. There are all sorts of different blockchains now, each with their own pros and cons when it comes to speed and how many transactions they can handle.
So it's not like one solution fits all.
Nope, not at all. Developers are always coming up with new ways to deal with this scalability problem. Some blockchains use different methods to reach consensus, or they add extra layers on top to handle more transactions. It's a fast-moving field.
Okay, so scalability is one thing. What about security? We're talking about putting really sensitive financial data, maybe even national secrets, onto a blockchain. How do we know it's really secure, like hacker-proof?
Security is definitely the top priority here. The good news is that blockchain, just by its nature, is super secure. The cryptography that protects the blockchain is extremely strong. It's really hard to crack.
But I mean, no system is perfect, is it?
That's true. While the blockchain itself might be secure, the weak points are often how you get in and out of it, like exchanges, digital wallets, the places where you interact with the blockchain. Those can be targets.
There's more than just protecting the blockchain. You got to protect the whole ecosystem around it, too.
Exactly. It's got to be a multi-layered approach. Strong encryption, solid authentication protocols, and regular security audits to find and fix any weaknesses.
And then there's a human factor, right? Even with the best tech, people can make mistakes or, intentionally do something bad.
That's a really important point. We can't just assume everyone involved will play by the rules or even know how to use these systems safely. We got to have safeguards against corruption and negligence, too.
So it's not just about the technology, but also the people and the processes that surround it.
Absolutely. If you want a secure and trustworthy blockchain system, you got to think about all those pieces.
This all sounds incredibly complicated. I'm wondering if these challenges are just too big for governments to handle.
They're definitely big challenges, but keep in mind, this technology is still relatively new. The blockchain world is super dynamic. People are constantly innovating. They're finding solutions to these problems all the time.
So you're optimistic about blockchain's future in government.
I am. The potential benefits are just too big to ignore. More transparency, more accountability, more efficiency. It could really change things for the better.
I can see why people are so excited about it. But even if we solve all the technical and security problems, there's still the question of public acceptance.
Yeah, that's a good point. Not everyone's going to be happy about this new technology. Some people are comfortable with how things are done now. Some people just don't trust blockchain.
And then there's the whole learning curve, right?
Right.
Think about training all those government officials and employees to actually use these new systems.
You got to have education and training, for sure. And you got to explain the benefits of blockchain clearly, address people's concerns in a way that makes sense.
So it's not just building the tech, it's also about building trust and understanding around it.
Exactly. Got to bring people along for the ride, make sure everyone benefits from this whole technological shift.
It sounds like a massive undertaking. But, you know, all the potential benefits you mentioned, more transparency, less corruption, a more efficient government that seems worth fighting for.
I agree. The idea that blockchain could improve government and give citizens more power, it's really exciting. Even with all the challenges, it's a vision worth pursuing.
And think about the global impact. If we can use blockchain to make governments more transparent and accountable around the world, it could level the playing field, Less corruption, more economic opportunities for everyone.
That's a powerful thought. Blockchain could not only make individual governments better, but could also lead to more cooperation and trust between countries.
That's amazing to think about. But let's not get too carried away with the blockchain utopia just yet. We've talked about a lot, both the good and the bad.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting conversation, and it's clear we're still in the early stages of all this. There's a lot more research and development to be done, a lot of questions to answer.
But the progress we've seen lately is undeniable. Things are moving fast. I can't wait to see where this technology takes us in the next few years.
I'm with you on that. This tech has the potential to reshape our world in some pretty profound ways.
So I think it's time to move on to our last part. We've talked about the potential, the challenges, the global impact. Now let's think about the future. What does all this mean for us, for society as a whole?
Let's do it. Let's
Yeah.
explore the future of blockchain and government together.
Okay, so we've gone deep on how blockchain could change governments from audits to like a totally transparent U.S. Treasury.
Yeah, lots of possibilities there.
We've also talked about the hurdles, making sure these systems are secure, that they can actually handle how much governments do. But now, like, what does it all mean for the future?
It's a big question for sure. If blockchain really does become a thing in government, how does that change how we relate to those institutions?
Right. There's a lot of like distrust in governments right now, globally even. People feel like the system's rigged, their voice doesn't matter. Can blockchain fix that?
Maybe. If it makes things more transparent, more accountable, yeah, maybe it could rebuild some of that trust.
Like imagine being able to see exactly where your tax dollars are going, how decisions are made.
Right. It'd give people a feeling of like ownership, more control over their government.
That's powerful. But that means governments would have to change how they operate too, right?
Mm.
Give up some control, be totally transparent.
Definitely a big shift in mindset for sure. They got to be willing to embrace a whole new way of working. But I think it's worth it for both sides.
So paint a picture for me. What's this future where blockchain's part of everything? What's that look like?
Well, governments could work way better, for one thing. Streamlined processes, less red tape, things just get done faster.
Oh, I like the sound of that.
Imagine renewing your passport or doing your taxes in a few clicks. Everything secure, verified on the blockchain.
That's the dream. But what about privacy? We've talked about transparency, but if everything's on a public blockchain, isn't that risky for, like, personal data?
That's a real concern, yeah. But blockchain doesn't have to mean everything's public. You can design these systems to protect privacy and be transparent.
Like,
Some data could be encrypted, or maybe you need special permission to access it.
so it's all about finding that balance, huh?
Yep. Careful design, smart implementation, that's key. It's not just taking what exists and slapping blockchain on top. It's got to be thought out from the beginning, with privacy and security as, like, the foundation.
That sounds pretty complicated.
It is. But if we get it right, it could mean a fairer, more trustworthy relationship between people and their governments.
Okay, that's hopeful. But we've got to be realistic too, right? You mentioned downsides before. We've talked about security, scalability. the human factor.
Yeah.
But couldn't this tech be misused? Like, to create even more surveillance?
It's definitely a possibility. We got to be careful about that. Any powerful tech, blockchain included, can be used for good or bad.
So it's on us to make sure it's used responsibly.
That's right. Ethical implementation, safeguards, oversight, we need all of that.
So it's not some perfect solution, more like a tool. A really powerful tool, but one we got to use carefully.
Exactly. And that's where informed citizens are so important. We got to be part of these conversations, ask tough questions, hold our governments accountable.
So the future of blockchain in government, it's not something that just happens to us. It's something we create, right?
Yep. We build it together through the choices we make, how we act, how we engage with all of this.
Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up this deep dive. We've covered a lot, the technical stuff, the potential impact on society. It's been a lot.
A whirlwind tour of blockchain and government, for sure.
I hope everyone listening has a better grasp of this whole thing now. It's complex, and it's changing all the time. But before we go, one last thought. Imagine, like all government spending, tracked on a public blockchain, open for anyone to see. How would that change our world? More efficient governments, empowered citizens, less corruption. Or maybe new risks we haven't even thought of yet. These are big questions, no easy answers. But they're worth thinking about as we, figure out this whole blockchain frontier. And like always, keep exploring, keep learning, keep asking questions. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.